Today, we are going to talk about how do I stop letting self-doubt undermine me? This comes up a lot, right? Because it's not just that you're doubting yourself, it's that you're doubting yourself. You're aware you're doubting yourself. You're frustrated by that. You're shaming yourself, right? Like there's so much. It goes so deep. So we're going to break down what's going on in your nervous system, what's going on with your socialization, how does this show up in your life, what are the issues that get created with it, why does it make total freaking sense that this happens, right? That's what we're going to break it down so that we understand why this is happening. Because once we see it, we can change it. Then I'm going to give you some tips on how you can interrupt this very frustrating cycle. So let's dive in. All right, so our nervous system. So self-doubt is a freeze response. And it starts as self-doubt, but if we get too much self-doubt, then we get into overwhelm, which is also a freeze response, right? It's just kind of like taking it up a notch. So the brain thinks, right? Like, why is the nervous system being triggered? Well, the brain thinks that anything new is dangerous. Even a good new thing is dangerous, right? Like, why are people so nervous on their wedding day, right? It's because any amount of change is your nervous system takes that as danger, physical danger, flood your body with adrenaline and cortisol, right? And so everything that you want to do new, even if you really want to do it, even if it's like you took on a new project or you're trying to get more visibility, whatever it is, no matter how much you want it, no matter how excited you are, your brain thinks it's a threat to your physical safety. So it floods your body with the same chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline, that it does if you are about to be like chased by a lion, right? Okay, so what happens when something new happens, your nervous system's activated, your brain is like hyper aware and it's scanning for any possible threats of danger. So that's the scanning for the danger is actually what brings it in as, that little thought of like, are you sure? Right? And it just starts and it gets in there, right? And that voice is what creates the self-doubt. But it's coming from like this place of your brain's like, if I just wrap you in bubble wrap and never let you try anything new, then you will be safe, right? Okay, so that's our nervous system. So there's another layer that we always talk about in these, right? That we are validated and praised, particularly for people socialized as women, for putting our needs last. We're validated and praised for our appearance and for caretaking activities. And so what happens is that we learn over time to seek validation from others. They appreciate our appearance. They appreciate our acts of kindness and our caretaking, right? We're told we are a good parent or partner or leader or whatever it is, right? And we get that validation. But what happens is that we don't develop the skill of looking inward to validate ourselves, to like bake our own validation cookies. And so we don't learn to trust our instincts. And we are also afraid of how we're going to feel if something doesn't go right, because we're, of course, going to invite in the Uda triplets to tell us we should have done this, we could have done that. If only we would have done something else, right? We could have done more. We're also socialized, particularly for people socialized as women, is to value humbleness over confidence, right? Because confidence somehow gets equated with arrogance, right? And so this is another layer that's in there. And then finally, there's the very real fact for women and people in marginalized identities that we are not given the same consideration when we make mistakes, right? The stakes feel higher because the data says they probably are, right? We are not going to be given the same sort of pass of like, well, he's just learning. Chad, he'll figure it out. We just got to keep sticking with him, right? Like, this isn't something that people in marginalized identities experience in the same way. Okay, so we've got the nervous system, we've got our socialization. So we have a really good idea of like, why does this happen, right? And so, how does it show up? Well, we start, feeling insecure. We start second guessing our performance or our ability, even in areas where we're highly competent, which is why it feels so frustrating that it comes up, right? When we're like, why am I doubting myself? But of course I am, right? And we get anxiety because um, we're thinking about doing things that involve visibility or leadership or seeking recognition, right? All of those things are going to feel dangerous. So, of course, we're going to feel anxious. And then another feeling that comes up a lot that when we know we're undermining ourselves is a feeling of frustration. Of course we feel frustrated, right? Because you know you're holding yourself back and it doesn't feel like you can stop. And then finally, the last emotion that we're often dealing with in this particular scenario is shame, because you know it, you see it, and you're like, why do I do that to myself? And then we invite in the Uda triplets, right? I should have just spoken up. I could have done, I could have pushed back on that, right? And we create shame on top of everything else that we're feeling. So, of course, we talk ourselves out of opportunities before we even start, right? Of course, we second guess and overthink every decision. Of course, we go into perfectionist overdrive and overwork and overplan to avoid mistakes, right? Of course we do. It makes total sense. Of course, we hold back in meetings or we don't stand our ground or we don't get our ideas out there. And then, of course, we feel frustrated. And of course, we beat ourselves up for all of it, right? If you think about everything that's going on in our nervous system, everything with our socialization, all of the feelings that are coming from that, of course, these are the things that we're going to do. It makes total sense. All right. So, when we're doing this, what are some of the outcomes that we're creating? Well, we don't take opportunities that we probably could have knocked out of the park, or we might have faltered a little bit, but in the end, it would have been, I guess a home run. I don't like, I lost my baseball metaphor in the middle. All right. Or we avoid visibility and we don't get any recognition, which leads to being underutilized, right? And under earning because we're being underutilized. And within all of that, we end up not being seen as the authority and we don't get the autonomy that we've already earned, right? Which is super, super frustrating when you know that you're capable, but you know that you're also not showing it in the ways that would benefit you the most. And we get exhausted from the mental gymnastics, which means that we don't set and maintain boundaries as well as we could. And finally, we end up with a life that just feels a little bit smaller than what we know we're meant for. And that's the part that's just like, ugh, like even just talking about it right now, like my body has like a visceral response to that, right? Where you're just like, I know that I can do more and I'm in my own way and I don't know how to get out. So here are some tips to try. So don't invite in the Uda triplets. So the Uda triplets, we talked about them earlier. Shoulda, coulda, and woulda. I should have done that. If only I would have done more. I could have done this, right? But what the Uda triplets do when you invite them in is that they judge and they create shame. And shame is super, super powerful. Shame, Brene Brown's made an entire career out of shame, right? It's that powerful of an emotion. And so it seems like we're either when we invite the Oda triplets in that we're protecting ourselves, like we got to kind of beat ourselves up so we don't forget, so we don't make that mistake again, right? It can almost seem like irrational that we do it, but what else it does is it creates shame and it makes us feel small and it makes us not want to try because we don't want that judgment, right? But it's all the calls coming from inside the house. So what happens is when we stop trying to judge ourselves, when we were just like, no, thank you, Uda triplets, like go on back, right? When we do that, we can just work our way through whatever the primary emotion is. And we can have our own back. So the primary emotion might be embarrassment, frustration, anger, um, disappointment, right? But we can't get to that emotion when shame is just doing it. And we can't try things because we're so afraid of how it's going to feel in the future. But how it's going to feel in the future is shameful because of inviting the OODA triplets in. So, the other trick with the OODA triplets is we don't start judging ourselves for judging ourselves, right? What we do when we notice that we're judging ourselves is we just get curious. I wonder why I want to create shame on top of all these other emotions that I'm feeling, on top of disappointment, on top of anger, on top of frustration, on top of embarrassment, right? And that's how you slowly learn to have your own back. And if you have your own back, then you can try things and it's not a big deal. Okay. The second kind of tip for dealing with these is what I call and statements. So, and statements just allow you to have some nuance. They give you some space to be human, right? So, I can make a mistake without having it mean anything about me or my future or my abilities, right? My mentor says you're either winning or learning, right? And as adults, we learn by failing. There's no like, get a grade on this test, right? Like, there's no sort of semi objective measurement of our performance. The way that we learn as an adult is by failing. The more we can fail, the more we can learn, hence the winning or learning, right? But if we make every mistake mean something about us, if we beat ourselves up, if we feel shame every single time we make a mistake, that makes it really, really hard, right? Another and statement is you can just try something like, this is hard and I can do hard things, right? Or you can shift and kind of change the narrative. So, one way of building what I call self assurance, which is different than confidence, right? Self assurance comes from within. And so, one self assured kind of thought I can share with you is I don't know every step, but I know the next step and I trust myself to figure it out. Right? That can be super, super powerful. Or I can do it scared. I'm scared and I can do it scared. Or my brain's not a reliable narrator when it tells me that I'm going to screw this up, that I don't know what I'm doing, that who the F do I think I am, right? My brain is not a reliable narrator when it's giving me these self-doubting thoughts, right? Or when it's beating me up and making and creating from the sort of negative self-talk, creating more self-doubt. Um, and the thing about when you're practice the thoughts when you don't need them. Right now, I'm in Nevada instead of in San Francisco where I usually am. It's cold outside. And so I've got a gym membership so I can keep like getting some movement, even though I can't do my normal things of going outside. And so I'm practicing the thought, I'm a person who goes to the gym, but I'm not practicing it at the moment that I need to go to the gym because that is the last point, right? Then I'm just like kind of in this tug of war with myself. I'm a person who goes to the gym. Well, not today, right? Like whatever's going on. I practice it when it doesn't matter. And I lean into and imagine like, who is this person that goes to the gym? Right? What's she like? And I feel proud of like, I'm the person who's doing this for myself, right? Who's making, an alternate plan for getting the movement that I very much desire, right? But like, I lean into who she is, not in the moments when I need to call on her, but I'm building her up. The person who goes to the gym at a different time. And so when you're thinking about these thoughts, you need to practice them in put a sticky note up. Think about it, habit stack. So think about it, well, every day when I brush my teeth, I think this thought, or I put a sticky note on my coffee maker, and every time I get a cup of coffee, I see it. Or I set a time or a reminder on my phone that pops up and reminds me. But think it when the stakes are lower because it actually will help your brain start to believe it sooner. Okay. And then the last two tips I have are start with the default, I'm going to make mistakes. This is, it is inevitable that I'm going to make mistakes because then when the mistake happens, you're like, oh yeah. But we get surprised, right? We're surprised when the mistake happens. We're so anxious that we overplan and overthink and go into perfectionist overdrive because we don't want any mistakes to be visible, right? But what if we just start with the default? Mistakes are going to happen. I'm going to make mistakes. Then it just becomes, oh, this is the part where I made the mistake. I don't need to beat myself up because I expected it. I'm not surprised by it. So I'm not like I haven't triggered my nervous system because it's like, oh, this is just the part where mistakes are made. Of course there are. We're humans in the world, right? Like what would be really bizarre and surprising is if everything went to plan. That would be like bananas, right? Okay. And then the last thing I will suggest for you, and you don't need to do all of these. Just pick and choose the things that make sense for you and leave the rest. Is to counteract the negativity bias by collecting evidence of your wins. So at the end of each week, I do a what went well, what didn't, what do I want to do differently in the future, right? But the what went well, because your brain is really good, it will collect everything that you didn't do right. But if you can make a practice, right, of this is what I did right this week, what would I like to keep doing about what went right, right? Then you're counteracting the negativity bias and you're not getting so like lost in your own BS about like your skills and abilities and what's actually happening. And then if this has been you. If doubt keeps creeping in, even though that you know you're smart and you're capable and you're already doing the work, and you want to trust yourself deeply, you want to have that kind of relationship where you can look inward for the answer of, am I worthy? Am I valuable? Am I doing it right? Am I enough? Right? If you want to be able to speak up unapologetically, if you want to go after what you want without needing permission or perfection or proof, set up a time and come chat with me. We'll just do a quick call. I'll ask you a bunch of questions and I will give you my expert opinion on what I'm seeing, whether we decide to work together or not. But that link will also be in the comments in just a minute. And for those of you watching on the replay, it will be somewhere below, whatever, wherever this video ends up. So that has been it for today. Thank you so much. We're going to start doing these once a month again. And yeah, I'll see you next time.